Ladies and gentlemen, this just came out in the Washington Post. Danny Pantaleo has officially been fired from NYPD. I think this is a total disgrace. He murdered a man, and this is the worst thing that can happen to him is being fired. And we all know in America, being fired and you're a cop, all they do is go to another town or county and get hired elsewhere. Happens all the time. And Danny Pantaleo, why shouldn't he do it? He'll be free to do it. He has no criminal record when we know he should have one. I'm going to go ahead and play this video from the Washington Post.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm here to announce my decision in the disciplinary case of police officer Daniel Pantaleo, who is accused of violating NYPD policy while helping effect the lawful arrest of Eric Garner in Staten Island on July 17th, 2004. It's a decision that necessarily requires fairness and impartiality for Mr. Garner, who died following that encounter with police. It is also a decision that requires fairness and impartiality for Officer Pantaleo, who was sent by this department to assess the situation and take appropriate police action. First, I will discuss how I reached my decision, and then I will answer any questions you have on the topic. For some time prior to July 17, 2014, neighborhood residents purposely avoided the area in and directly around Tompkinsville Park in Staten Island. Conditions at that time arose from an array of criminal activity. Drug dealers worked at the edges of the park, and across the street, selling narcotics. A handful of men regularly sold loose cigarettes made cheaper by the fact that New York State taxes had not been paid on them. A liquor store nearby sold alcohol to people who would drink that alcohol in the park. People would sometimes use drugs, urinate, and pass out on benches there. That summer, the week before, there had been reports of theft and 2 robberies in the park. There were 911, 311, and other complaints from residents and merchants on an ongoing basis. In some cases, warnings or summonses were issued. In other cases, arrests were made. And that was the situation at Tompkinsville Park on the day Officer Pantaleo was sent with another officer to conduct an enforcement operation. When the second officer observed Mr. Garner hand out cigarettes in exchange for money, they approached Mr. Garner to make an arrest. That offense could have resulted in a summons, but Mr. Garner refused to provide identification, which meant would have been brought to the precinct for processing. For several minutes on that widely viewed video, Mr. Garner makes it abundantly clear that he will not go willingly with the police officers. He refused to cooperate with the arrest and to comply with lawful orders. The video also makes clear that Officer Pantaleo's original efforts to take Mr. Garner into custody were appropriate, and that he initially attempted 2 maneuvers sanctioned by the police department. Officer Pantaleo first grabbed Mr. Garner's right wrist and attempted an armbar technique in preparation for handcuffs to be used. Mr. Garner immediately twisted and pulled and raised both of his hands while repeatedly telling the officers to not touch him. Officer Pantaleo then wrapped his arms around Mr. Garner's upper body. Up to that point in this tense and rapidly evolving situation, there was nothing to suggest that Officer Pantaleo attempted to place Mr. Garner in a chokehold. But what happened next, matter we must address. The 2 men stumbled backward towards the large plate glass window, the storefront behind them, and Officer Pantaleo's back made contact with the glass, causing the window to visibly buckle and warp. The person videotaping the episode later testified at the NYPD trial that he thought both men would crash through the glass. It is at that point in the video that Officer Pantaleo is seen with his hands clasped together and his left forearm pressed against Mr. Garner's neck, what constitutes a chokehold. The NYPD court ruled that while certainly not preferable, that hold was acceptable during that brief moment in time because the risk of falling through the window was so high. But that exigent circumstance no longer existed, the court found, when Officer Pantaleo and Mr. Garner moved to the ground. As Mr. Garner balanced himself on the sidewalk on his hands and knees, Deputy Commissioner of Trials Rosemarie Maldonado found that Officer Pantaleo consciously disregarded the substantial and unjustifiable risk of maneuver explicitly prohibited by the department. She found that during the struggle, Officer Pantaleo had the opportunity to readjust his grip from a prohibited chokehold to a less lethal alternative, but did not make use of that opportunity. Instead, even once Mr. Garner was moved to his side on the ground, with his left arm behind his back and his right hand still open and extended, Officer Pantaleo kept his hands clasped and maintained the chokehold. Mr. Garner's obvious distress is confirmed when he coughs and grimaces. Moreover, Trials Commissioner Maldonado found that Officer Pantaleo's conduct caused physical injury that meets the penal law threshold and that his recklessness caused multi-layered internal bruising and hemorrhaging that impaired Mr. Garner's physical condition and caused substantial pain and was a significant factor in triggering an asthma attack. For all of these reasons, taken together, even after reviewing Officer Pantaleo's commendable service record of nearly 300 arrests and 14 department medals earned leading up to that day, Trial Commissioner Maldonado recommended that he be dismissed from the department. In making this penalty recommendation, she wrote, this tribunal recognizes that from the outset, Mr. Garner was non-compliant and argumentative, and further notes that the patrol guide allows officers to use reasonable force when necessary to take an uncooperative individual into custody. What the patrol guide did not allow, however, even when this individual was resisting arrest, was the use of the prohibited chokehold. As you know, a number of external authorities have asked many of the same questions we have about this incident. On August 19, 2014, about a month after Mr. Garner's death, the Staten Island District Attorney's Office announced it would impanel a grand jury to present evidence on that matter. On December 3, 2014, those 23 Staten Island residents voted to not indict Officer Pantaleo, clearing him of criminal wrongdoing. That same day, the United States Attorney General announced that the U.S. Department of Justice would conduct its own investigation into Mr. Garner's death in a way bringing federal civil rights charges against Officer Pantaleo. In the intervening years, the Justice Department made ongoing requests to the NYPD, asking us to delay our internal disciplinary process until its civil rights investigation was complete. We honored those requests as their process stretched from one administration to the next, with no action by federal prosecutors. And so on July 21st, 2018, we decided to begin NYPD proceedings. Members of the public in general and Mr. Garner's family in particular have grown understandably impatient. The trial began on May 13, 2019. On July 16, 2019, one day before the 5-year statute of limitations expired, the Justice Department announced it would not file federal charges against Officer Pantaleo. Then, on August 2, 2019, with Officer Pantaleo's NYPD trial concluded, Trials Commissioner Maldonado ruled that Officer Pantaleo's use of a prohibited chokehold was reckless and constituted a gross deviation from the standard of conduct established for a New York City police officer. After noting that Officer Pantaleo had admitted he was aware that chokeholds are prohibited by the department, she further concluded, with strongly worded and repeated warnings about the potentially lethal effects of chokeholds found throughout multiple sections of the training materials, it is evident that the department made its 2006 recruits keenly aware of the inherent dangers associated with the application of pressure to the neck. Given this training, a New York City police officer could reasonably be expected to be aware of the potentially lethal effects connected with the use of a prohibited chokehold, be vigilant in eschewing its use. From the start of this process, I was determined to carry out my responsibility as police commissioner unaffected by public opinions demanding one outcome over another. I examined the totality of the circumstances and relied on the facts. And I stand before you today confident that I have reached the correct decision. and that has certainly not made it an easy decision.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop it right here and say, he's doing what is expected. Cops are not going to sell each other out in this country. They're going to stick to the bitter end with their story. There was nothing going on that street where Eric Garner should have ended up dead. And the reports I heard, he just broke up a fight. I don't believe the cops observed him selling any loosies. And again, these Arabs, we all know this, have stores all in the black community. They sell loosies in those stores every day. You can get out of your car and go to any random Arab store. They will sell you a loosie. I never seen a cop go in there and put them in a headlock and put them in a chokehold over it. So no matter how much they try to justify these things and tell us that it was reasonable force, we know damn well it wasn't. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Danny Pantaleo is now fired. Don't be surprised if in the next few weeks he comes cropping up again, just like Betty Shelby, in a different police department. That's usually how it goes. And people are still fighting the cop that killed Tamir Rice to keep him off of the police force. He's made 2 attempts to get back on a different police force, and because of the public outcry, we have been very successful in keeping him off of the force. And that same thing is going to have to happen when it comes down to Danny Pantaleo. It's going to have to be so much public outcry, they'll back off hiring him. I think this is a disgrace. Danny Pantaleo is a murderer. He should be in jail, but we are not in a just system, ladies and gentlemen. We're in this one. There is no justice you're going to ever find in this system that is being ran. Look, they're letting rapists walk the hell out of the courtroom with 10 years probation for brutally raping, violent rapes, and they are letting that go. So, look, the Danny Pantaleos exist all across police departments in America, and they will continue to do so. This seems to be the kind of cop they like in this country. Cops, in my opinion, are way too empowered. And like I said, when you look around the world at police forces, nobody empowers their cops like they do here. You can tell something is very abnormally wrong with the way they are doing things here in this country. But you can best believe America is on a decline, and that judgment will continue on America. Wait until you get into your recession. That recession is coming. You got a president in office that have never successfully ran one single business. And if you think he's not going to drag you into a recession, you got another thought coming. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.